Okay, I'm going to talk to you today about positive coping skills. Our book by Compton and Hoffman defines this as a response aimed at diminishing the physical, emotional, and psychological burden that is linked to stressful life events and daily hassles. So this is basically just kind of another way to define a stress reliever. So coping skills can be physiological, psychological, and social or cognitive. Coping strategies generally follow two approaches. The first is with the external environment. So this is physical health and health behavior, which is like exercising and making sure that you're eating right. The second is psychological or cognitive factors. This basically deals with the expectations you have of yourself or that you have of others or that others have of you, and your basic attitudes and beliefs of the rest of the world. So any good stress management or coping program combines these two approaches. That's because coping, or how you perceive an event is basically how you take an event objectively and how you perceive that event. So it's impacted by your sense of optimism or pessimism or just your basic outlook on life. There are three basic subtypes to coping styles. The first is emotion-focused. So this focuses primarily on emotional reactions to a stressor. So this deals with emotional processing and emotional expression. Emotional processing is understanding your reaction to a stressor. So just basically how you feel about an event. And emotional expression is expressing the emotions related to the stressor. So it's how you feel and then how you show how you feel about the event. The second is problem-focused, which focuses on the situation or the cognitions related to the stressor. So these are, they focus on the behavioral or the cognitive aspects of the event. So the behavioral part is when you take action to fix the problem, and the cognitive part is when you change your thinking in order to fix the problem. The third is emotional avoidance, which is when you avoid, ignore, or deny the reality of the stressor. Most often people combine all these different types of coping because their effectiveness really depends on the situation or the person. So one important question I think when dealing with all this is what's more detrimental to our well-being? Is it big events that just happen from time to time, or is it the smaller hassles that happen every day? I read in our textbook, it actually surprised me is that it's the smaller daily hassles that are more problematic. This is because daily frustrations are more likely to upset your current mood, and a persistent negative mood is what can affect your well-being. When it comes to big events like marriage, death, divorce, the birth of a child, even though these can affect someone emotionally, physically, intellectually, or spiritually, they're more often associated with religious rituals, and that usually helps people handle the situation that's involved. So one article I read, it was by Mark Matzik, I believe you say it. He gives specific steps to coping with an event, whether it's big or small in your life. He also says that powerful negative emotions can't stay bottled up because it's just bad for your health. He says that sometimes admitting that you can't cope on your own can be the turning point, because that's when we start to ask for help. But the steps that he talks about, the first is to let the bad news sink in. That comes when you acknowledge that you're in bad times, because pretending to not be in pain is stressful in itself. But you also have to be careful not to catastrophize or exaggerate your hard times, because that can obviously make you feel worse about what's going on. The second is to accept what you can't change. So you need to acknowledge that you may not be able to control the situation, because this can grant you a sense of peace and patience, because maybe you feel like you should be doing something all the time to fix it, but if you realize that you might not can fix it, you can just relax a little bit. The third is to manage the mind-body connection. one of the best things you can do in a crisis is to get biology on your side by tapping into your body's ability to heal or calm itself. Because there's kind of a back and forth between the brain and the body at all times. He says that thoughts and emotions activate stress pathways and affect bodily functioning and vice versa. The fourth is to focus on faith. He says that faith involves trusting that whatever is happening has a meaning and a purpose, and that even hard times can teach us something. The ability to turn one confusion over to a higher power, or simply to believe, is a really great way for anyone to achieve peace, whatever religion they may have. But obviously, for me and for most of us, that would be Christianity and the Bible. So I thought this was a great time to read Philippians 4:6-7, which says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Jesus Christ." So this verse just shows us how giving your worries to God is it's a great way, or maybe the best way, to deal with stress or any type of situation, big or small, in our lives. So I want to talk now a little bit about why it matters. Obviously, this can help us deal with school and sports and things like that. We've talked about stress a lot. But I think it's important that we know how to handle more major life events in our life. And so not only knowing how to deal with our stress, but it's about knowing how to help others deal with their stress. Because I think it's obvious that most people in this room are going to be going into a career that involves helping people. And so it's really important that we know how to help others as well. The second important thing is to know that positive emotions lead to positive coping. And both of these things are important to the development of positive health and a sense of well-being and longevity. The third has to do with relationships. Like I said before, it's important that we know how to help others, and helping someone deal with their stress, it can improve your relationship with that person. And we've all talked about how important positive relationships are to our well-being. And stress is contagious. And so if you know how to deal with your own stress, then it can obviously in turn help someone else not catch that stress. And it's always good to have someone be there for you when you need help. So the last thing that I'd like to end with is a quote from Iris Bolton. I don't know if anyone has heard of her. We've talked about her in Mr. View's classes before, but she wrote a book called My Son, My Son. She was the head of a counseling center and suicide prevention. While she was working there, her son committed suicide, and she wrote a book about that. And in it, she tells her story and how she helped other people. She tells their stories as well, and she gives just a really, of course it's very emotional, but she also gives a very objective and practical look about how to deal with big events and how to help other people deal with them. But the whole book really emphasizes relationships and how important it is just to have someone there for you and to be there for someone else. Just being around people you love is what's most important when coping with any event. So she says that yet, despite our blunders, failures, and mistakes, we manage to cope, and to cope with love. There, I've said it, to cope with love. Surely that is a secret bond that holds the human family together, and with such a plan, we know we are not helpless. So I've always loved that quote. I love the book. I think it's just important that we know that being around people we love and loving other people is the best way to cope with any situation in life. That's it. Yes?
I was going to ask you, what coping style do you see yourself using most of the time?
I would say that I probably focus on emotions the most. I tend to be too emotional sometimes. So I think I should probably work on using the problem focused as well.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? Okay.